Yeah. Pro Fan Sports Podcast. Let's get it. Pro fans, tune into the program. Every single week, get the dope, fam. Sean on the mic, very flat too. Keep you updated, that's what we do. Pro fans, tune into the program. Pro fans, tune into the program. Pro fans, tune into the program. Every single week, get the dope, fam.
Yo, what to do, everybody? It's your boy, John Altidor with Pro Fan Sports Podcast, where fans of the pros go back at you with my boys, Vlad and Barry. And this week, we got DougKyed, content producer for Nesson, writer for Profootballfocus right now. If you're into Patriots content, you probably read a whole bunch of this guy's stuff, and he also does a mailbag for the Patriots as well. How you doing, Doug?
I'm doing well. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good.
Very good. Thank you, Doug. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. First of all,
thanks for coming on, Doug.
For real. Thanks for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. And if you're watching this right now, we got episode 71 going down right now. Please make sure you're subscribing to the channel. You're liking the video so others can get this video, especially because we got DougKyed on the show. So, we're talking about the Patriots today. And I think, my first question is, it's stemming from the fact that last year we didn't really have an off season, right? I know we didn't have any practices, in person anyway. I don't know what it was like for the Patriots beat writers. How you feel about, the Patriots preseason coming up here, training camp, and, the things that you're able to do this year versus what you couldn't do last year.
Yeah, it's definitely way different. It's going to be way different during the season as well. But, yeah, there was a really limited amount of media that was allowed to watch practices last season. I think it was like 25 or 30 members of the media. Now it's been increased to 75 plus, full stands of fans and everything like that. So almost back to normal there. It's going to be a little bit different talking to the players, definitely still more limited that way. I think probably for another year until, everyone gets vaccinated or until everything gets back a little bit more to normal. But definitely nice that we're going to have fans in the stands at training camp. All the media is allowed to be there. And then we'll actually get some preseason games, which are big. Last year, we were all kind of going into the season a little bit blindly without preseason games. I think even teams were. Without actually seeing those guys playing on the field during the summer, they weren't able to make some of the same roster decisions that they usually would be able to, both on their own team and bringing players from other teams. So I think that's going to be a major difference this summer as well.
Yeah, would you say, Tom Brady left, went and got a Super Bowl with Tampa Bay Bucks. This is going to be the second season without him. Would you say this season is potentially one of the most important seasons for Bill Belichick's career here?
Yeah, I'd say so. It's a chance to kind of prove himself, I guess I'd say. I'm not sure if he really needs
right
at this point after what is it, 6 with the Patriots, 1 or 2 more with the Giants. But, I think that he probably feels like he needs to prove himself a little bit without Tom Brady at the helm. It's either going to be obviously Cam Newton or Mac Jones back there. But I think that you can see the pressure that the Patriots are putting on themselves this offseason when they signed so many guys, when they spent as much money as they did. And that's not Bill Belichick's money. That's Robert Kraft's money that he's spending. So, I think that it comes with some promises to Robert Kraft that the team is going to be significantly better in 2021.
Absolutely. And, the biggest thing right now is obviously the quarterback situation, with Cam Newton coming back. And then we drafted number 15 overall, Mac Jones. What are your thoughts around that? Do you think Cam Newton's going to last the season? Or, I see a lot of things, people saying Mac's going to start week 1, week 5. Most people are saying week 5. But what do you feel about that right there?
My expectation at this point would be that Cam Newton would start the season as the starter. I think that, if you look through the past 5 or 6 years, just the quarterbacks taken in the first round, the majority of them don't start in week 1. The majority of them either start in year 2 or a little bit further along into the season. So especially if you're talking about the Patriots, you even look at last year's rookies. Kyle Duggar didn't play a lot to begin the season. Josh Uche didn't play really until the end of the season. So those are, rookies at more normal positions. Now you're talking about a rookie quarterback. It would take a lot, I think, for Mac Jones to do enough this summer in training camp and preseason to pass Cam Newton. Bill Belichick already said after they took Mac Jones, Cam Newton's our starter. Cam Newton's our guy. So, he didn't have maybe the greatest spring sessions, but I don't think Mac Jones looked that great during the spring sessions anyway. So I think they're coming in a little bit with a clean slate during training camp. Whoever is the best man is going to win this summer, and I would expect it to be Cam Newton. As far as when Mac Jones gets on the field, I think that all kind of depends on how Cam Newton plays once the season begins. I think that Cam Newton will be significantly better this season with another year under his belt, a full offseason, plus much better weapons around him on the offense.
Well, let's hope so, because we can't survive what happened last year. That was atrocious to watch. That was hard to watch after 20 years of seeing the ball sling down the field beautifully, and then to a guy that just couldn't read the defense and couldn't throw the ball. That was really hard to watch. I mean, you mentioned, Bill Belichick spent a lot of money this offseason. Do you think he's done enough as far as putting weapons around Cam or Mac Jones for that, for them to be successful? I mean, I think we got some weapons, but I don't know. I'm not too impressed with the receiving core.
It's tough. I think that they spent about as much as they could on wide receivers and tight ends, obviously bringing in Johnny Smith, Hunter Henry, Kendrick Bourne, Nelson Aguilar. They still have Jacoby Myers. But, if you look at a lot of the analysts around like Twitter and the media, Patriots are still ranked in the mid to low 20s as far as best pass-catching weapons across the NFL. And you'd probably have to agree with that just when you look at who they do have at wide receiver and tight end. Obviously, they've got one of the best tight end cores in the NFL, but the wide receivers are still a little bit lacking. I think there is still room if they could acquire some real top-flight wide receiver, but they didn't pull the trigger on Julio Jones. Who knows if someone else like Odell Beckham or someone else is going to come available. So I think this is the group that they're going to work with. And I think it's good enough to see a lot of improvement out of Cam Newton or Mac Jones or whoever that quarterback is going to be, because if you look at who they were throwing to last year, N'Keal Harry was a starter, Damiere Byrd was a starter, Ryan Izzo was their top tight end. It was pretty ugly. Even Julian Edelman, I mean, he had a good start to the season, then he had the knee injury and he was never really the same. Yeah. So it was basically Jacoby Myers and no one else on that offense.
Right.
Now at least they've got Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith, Kendrick Bourne, Nelson Aguilar, actual starting caliber players at those positions.
I mean, I agree that they're starting position caliber players, but just like you said, they're ranked, in the 20th in pass catching players, and those guys, as far as the middle of the road receivers, they're not blowing anybody out of the water. So, yeah. And as far as Nico Harry go, what's going on with that? He asked for a trade or something?
Yeah, they demanded a trade, but didn't seem like it went too well because he's not traded yet. So,
right.
I mean, I think that if you're N'Keal Harry and you got 500 yards over the first 2 years of his career, you can't really make trades. It doesn't, it doesn't go the same way. There was a report yesterday that Chandler Jones requested a trade earlier in the offseason. That holds a little bit more ground than if N'Keal Harry's.
It's about leverage.
Definitely.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think there's not really any leverage there. The Patriots could probably at best get a low round pick for N'Keal Harry. So at this point, it's probably better to keep him, right? I mean,
exactly.
If you're only going to get a 5th round pick for him, then if you're, we're also talking about the wide receiver core in general. N'Keal Harry's their number 5 or number 4 wide receiver right now. And the guys below him on the depth chart, Christian Wilkerson, Isaiah Zuber, Trey Nixon, these aren't guys who you really want as your number 4 or 5 wide receiver. So in an ideal situation, N'Keal Harry comes in, impresses in training camp, and they keep him around. If not, maybe they'll ship him off for a 5th or 6th round pick or something like that.
Any chance to use him as a tight end?
Oh, wow.
Wow, huh?
Wow.
Really? I know.
He doesn't have the speed really necessarily to play wide receiver. I think it would take a lot for him to have to move to
make that
tight
switch.
end. And I would say, I guess, if they're really adamant about going into the season with a 2 tight end set, and if one of those guys, if Hunter Henry or Jonnu Smith got injured at some point, then maybe they start to put him in, a flex tight end role or something like that. But at this point, I'm not sure if there's much room for him at tight end either, because they've still got Dalton Keene, Devin Asiasi, Matt Lacoste, a bunch of other guys at that position as well.
It's so disappointing how terrible the Patriots are at drafting wide receivers. I mean, you would have thought that, a lot of people were blaming Brady, which there could be some truth there, but I mean, those guys just don't pan out whenever they go anywhere else either.
I know, it's true. I mean,
is it a matter of drafting or developing? What's really the issue there?
I think it's more developing than drafting. I think that historically the Patriots have run an extremely difficult offense to learn. And this might just be me playing, sports psychologist or whatever it is, but usually you can kind of tell which guys are going to get it just by their approach. Jacoby Myers, I could tell right away that he was taking the right approach to learning the offense, and that's worked out pretty well. Malcolm Mitchell, obviously it didn't work out because of the knee injury, but I could tell right away that he was going to get it.
And what is that? Sorry to cut you off, but what is that? Right, what is that right approach?
I think it's just kind of a taking it serious, but also having a calm approach to it. You don't want to have a guy come in and be like, oh yeah, this is going to be easy. I've played football all my life. If you see that, then you're kind of like, no, this is a little bit different. And if someone seems really overwhelmed by it, then that's not good either. I think that you have to have that middle ground where you understand it's going to be difficult, but you're not completely overwhelmed by what you're walking into. And, it just was. It was Malcolm Mitchell and Jacoby Myers. Those are two guys that right away I was like, I think this might work out. And like I said, it didn't get with Mitchell because of the knee injury, but those are two guys who did perform right away pretty well.
We don't win that Atlanta Super Bowl without Malcolm Mitchell.
For sure.
Unbelievable.
No, definitely not.
Unbelievable.
Undecided.
Oh yeah, sure was.
Definitely.
He was great, and I think he was really the guy that started that comeback, and that Tom Brady actually trusted and had confidence in going to, and he would deliver and be able to come up with those catches every time Brady was targeting, which was impressive, because how many times do we see Tom Brady trusting a rookie and a wide receiver in a Super Bowl game? Almost never. We don't usually typically see him have that kind of trust and confidence in young receivers. Usually he goes to his veteran guys that he has more, continuity and, and more trust in. So, no, that was certainly impressive to see that. Doug, I wanted to ask you about Stefan Gilmour and about that situation, because I've been hearing that supposedly he is, expected to go to training camp, even with, him not being at OTAs and, due to, his contract situation. So I just wanted to ask, what's, update do you have for us on the Stefan Gilmour situation, and do you see him, being with the team, past this season, and what do you think ends up, being the case? Does he get an extension and get raise that he's looking for, or do they trade him and send him to another team and get, maybe some picks, or something for him? So how do you see that situation playing out?
I think the most likely scenario is that he sticks around, either, with a 1-year pay raise like he got last year, or on a multi-year extension. I think it's tough because he's coming off the quad injury. He's going to start training camp on the PUP list. It's tough to trade a guy after a somewhat serious injury like he had last year. And if you're not going to get, top dollar for him, then you probably might as well work out some sort of deal to keep him around. Still one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. I do expect him to report at training camp when they are practicing this week. But one of the reasons for that is just because of the new collective bargaining agreement, not to get too far down, the weeds here, but with the new CBA, players are fined $50,000 every day that they miss training camp. So that's pretty prohibitive. By the end of the summer, you're talking about like $1 million coming out of a guy's pocket, or even $2 million maybe. So I think what's going to happen there is that he'll probably stay on the PUP list until they figure out some sort of deal. Players aren't really holding out anymore. They're holding in, where they appear, they come to training camp, they, don't skip it so they don't get fined $50,000 every day, but they still aren't going to practice until they actually get what they want.
Gotcha. How good do you think this Patriots team can be? Like, what do you your expectations for them this season, and how do you think they'll do with what they have on the roster?
Can I ask a follow-up question to Stefan Gilmour before you answer that question from Barry? Just, I mean, with Stefan Gilmour, with his situation, let's say, I don't know, he gets traded or he's not here anymore. What does the defensive back of the Patriots look like? And also with Patrick Chung retiring, is Kyle Duggar taking his place in that? Like, how is that gonna work?
Took his number.
That's right. He sure did.
He did take that number 23. I'd say that as it stands right now, with Stefan Gilmour on the roster, Patriots have a good secondary. They've got a good, deep secondary. But if you take Stefan Gilmour off the field, then you're kind of in trouble there at the cornerback position, because obviously you've still got J.C. Jackson. I like J.C. Jackson a lot. Maybe he proved last season that he's not, a lockdown number one. I think he still has that potential. Then Jonathan Jones would be in the slot. There's no real guarantee who would be in that other outside cornerback role. Jalen Mills would probably be the top candidate for it, but he was always better in Philly as kind of a super sub at safety, the slot, works outside when he has to. Joan Williams is another possibility, but he hasn't really done a whole lot through the first 2 years of his career, kind of been another Nico Harry type where he hasn't lived up to that second-round potential. Beyond that, you're talking about guys like Mike Jackson, Miles Bryant, who's more of a slot option. So they don't really have an obvious guy who would fill in at cornerback if Stefan Gilmour doesn't play. I think that that's one of the reasons why they do need to keep him around. They're in a little bit better shape at safety with Devin Mccourty still around. Kyle Duggar probably, he's competing with Adrian Phillips for that other starting safety role. I think they both wind up playing a lot, but you'll also see Jalen Mills in there, Miles Bryant. So safety's in pretty good shape. The slot's in really good shape. They've got J.C. Jackson, but if Stefan Gilmour's not there, then like I said, they could be in a little bit of trouble at the outside cornerback position. As far as, overall expectations for the Patriots this season, I think the floor is that they have to make the playoffs. With all the money that they spent, all the defensive additions, they should have one of the best defenses in the NFL, at least on paper this season, assuming Gilmour's back. Offense will be significantly better than it was last season just because the offensive line's still intact. They've got better weapons around Cam Newton or Mac Jones, whoever's the quarterback. But I'm looking at, 10, 11 wins, somewhere around there for the Patriots. And if they can't get to that, then you have to look at the season as a disappointment. You can't spend all that money and then go 7-10 or 8-9, whatever it would be with a 17-game season this year.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man. If you're watching right now, please make sure you're subscribing and liking the video. We're here with DougKyed. If you want to follow him on Twitter, it's at DougKyed, DougKyed. So he's dropping a lot of content in there. Make sure you're following him. And with that said, we did spend a lot of money in free agency. Who do you think out of all the free agents is going to make the biggest impact on this team this year?
It's tough. I'd say on defense might be the obvious choice, but Matt Judon, I think that he can add a lot to the defense. I was even talking to him, before the break, during OTAs, I said that, you played a lot on the line of scrimmage with the Ravens, but would you be willing to do more with the Patriots? And he said, I played a lot off the line of scrimmage. I played a lot of linebacker with the Baltimore Ravens. So I think that, if you're looking at that whole linebacker core, who fits in next to Dante Hightower, Kyle Van Noy, he's going to be in the mix. He's either going to be an outside linebacker, inside linebacker. I think they're going to move him around quite a bit. Really good pass rushing threat that they brought on there. And on offense, it has to come down between Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith. I like Jonnu Smith just because he's the more versatile player. He might not be quite as good and experienced as a pass catcher as Hunter Henry is, but he was a better blocker with the Titans. He can carry the ball out of the backfield, super athletic, lines up in line, like I said, lines up in the backfield, split out wide at wide receivers. So it's going to be really fun to see what Josh McDaniels and Bill Belichick actually do with Jonnu Smith this season, because he's that joker that they can move around the field and do a lot of different things with.
Absolutely. I think Jonnu Smith would make a big impact, but I definitely wasn't happy with the fact that he got hurt. Like first practice he came in, that was a bummer right there. You mentioned earlier Chandler Jones. He just requested a trade, and of course the Patriots fans are gonna get into that right there, and think about him coming back on the team. Would that be something the Patriots would look at?
It's tough. I think that the money might be a little bit prohibitive to bring him back. If he's not happy on the deal that he's got with the Cardinals, then really not sure if the Patriots would be able to pay as much as he wants. So that seems like it might be a little bit of a non-starter unless there was some deal worked out, with Gilmour involved for Chandler Jones. But even then, I think it would be tough. I think that the Patriots liked him a lot. I don't think they traded him because they didn't like him as a person, even though there was that weird situation before he was traded where he was walking around Foxborough or whatever it was.
Wasn't he like naked at the fire station or something?
Yeah, he was on ice or something like that. I forgot exactly what the situation was.
I think he was on K2 or something.
Yes, I think that was
that's reported.
Even after that, I think that they were fine with him as a person, but it was just they weren't going to be able to get the deal done with him. But now I think that the price might be too high for the Patriots to be able to afford it.
I think so too, and bringing on Judon, and we got some promising guys on the other side as well. With that said, there's a couple second-year guys that seem to have been making noise, whether it was last year or in training camps this year. I'm talking about Kyle Duggar, Devin Asiasi, and Josh Uche, right? Who is the second-year player you think that's going to make the biggest impact or the biggest leap, like Belichick would like to say? I
think you might see Duggar make the biggest impact, but I think Josh Uche might make the biggest leap. I was really excited by what I saw from Josh Uche. It's unpadded practices. There's no contact, all those things, but Uche was just bringing a different level of speed and intensity than anyone else on the field, and we'll see if that translates into training camp when they've got the pads on. But he's just a really exciting player. He's a big guy. He's 245, 250, 6'3", 6'4", played all over the field at Michigan. Never actually earned really a starting role consistently at Michigan, weirdly enough. But I think that might come now with the Patriots, whether that is at inside linebacker or at outside linebacker. But just based on how they were using him in camp, it seemed like they had some pretty high hopes for Josh Uche, that he was at least going to be part of that third down rotation, pass rushing, if not, taking on a starting role this season. And that would probably come next to Dante Hightower at linebacker, if I had to guess where it was.
Yeah, absolutely. Vlad, you got some?
Sure. Talking about the league now, the league in general, I mean, Aflazo vaccination has been a big topic around the league, and some teams are getting vaccinated, some teams are not. What's the percentage of vaccination rate in the league, and how do you think that's going to impact the season? I mean, last year we had some postponed games, and I read something about teams that have COVID-19 that has to postpone games for COVID-19 will forfeit games. What's going on with that?
I think you're certainly at an advantage as an NFL team if you do have more players vaccinated. I think overall the league's right around 80% players vaccinated.
Oh, really?
There are still some teams.
Yeah, I did hear that, like 83, right?
Yeah, and then I think there are still some teams that are hovering around that 60% rate. So there are certainly teams that are on the lower side. The majority are on the higher side. The Patriots, I think, are one of those that's on the higher side. But yeah, I mean, I think the NFL will do everything they can to get any postponed games rescheduled if they do need to be postponed. But if they can't, and they've already said that they're not willing to add another week to the season, if they can't, then yeah, a team would have to forfeit a game, which is obviously that's massive, and that's all of the inspiration these teams need to get as many players vaccinated as possible. Also seems like almost every single coach has been vaccinated. We did see Cole Popovich for the Patriots step down. We saw Rick Dennison, the Vikings offensive line coach, step down.
Are both those guys step down because they don't want to get the vaccine?
Yeah, that was the report that Popovich didn't want to get the vaccine, so he was stepping down. And then Rick Dennison, who's quite a bit older, I think he's in his 60s, he also didn't want to, so he's probably going to step down as well. But it seems like that's pretty rare across the league. It seems like coaches have been getting vaccinated.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, we also heard about Deandre Jordan contemplating. DeAndre
Andre
Hopkins
Hopkins,
contemplating,
yeah,
retirement. I thought that was
that
absolutely
was wild. Yeah,
Yeah,
pretty
for
crazy.
sure. I mean, I think that the memo that the NFL sent out to teams made everyone kind of take a step back a little bit about, oh wow, so now we're talking about forfeiting games. Now we're talking about some really serious things here. Players would have to forfeit their game checks if a game got canceled.
Oh, really?
But
Wow.
I spoke to Patriots long snapper Joe Cardona. His message was essentially that if that's not incentive to get vaccinated, then you just want to protect all the players around you to get vaccinated as much as possible. But talked to another player who was not overly happy with the NFLPA that they have allowed this to happen.
That's what I'm sorry to cut you off, but that was exciting. That was gonna be my follow up. Like, it's the NFLPA is such a weak
organization.
So weak. Yeah,
Exactly. It is.
The weak group.
Absolutely.
Like, that would never happen in the NBA.
Right.
Never.
Definitely not.
Matt
If
Judon really
If they
speaking
had
on
to forfeit
Twitter.
the game in the NBA, the players would still get paid, I feel.
You're probably right. It obviously it's a smaller sample
Yeah,
size in the
obviously.
NFL where you're only talking about 17 games versus 82 or 81, whatever it is. But I mean, no, you saw it. Matt Judon was really railing against the NFLPA on Twitter after all this came out. And one thing that was kind of interesting is that the players agreed to sign this CBA basically right around the time that Rudy Gobert tested positive back last March. So if they had known what was going to happen with COVID and that it would take this long and that there would be these repercussions, I don't think they would have agreed to sign the CBA, but now they're kind of stuck on it. But I'm with you. I think that the NFLPA probably doesn't watch out for players enough. I think they watch out for the pockets of players for the most part enough where they're really trying to work with the NFL to get as much money as possible for the league. But sometimes that doesn't benefit players. And this is one of the situations where this might not be benefiting players the way that they want to be.
Yeah, that's awful. I don't agree with the forfeiter games, and definitely not the players not getting paid. That's just not okay. I mean,
yeah, you're walking a really fine line there, man.
Because
For sure, absolutely.
I mean, many times somebody contact COVID-19 and nobody knows how they contacted it. There could be too many factors. So
right.
It's not that somebody went out. I mean, sometimes that does happen. Somebody goes on purpose and they contacted it, but I don't know. I just think it's very unfair. The other question I had was about Aaron Rodgers. I mean, so he's coming
back.
Now he's back.
Yeah.
On Friday, I heard that his teammates expected him to be back with the Packers in 2021, and obviously that's wound up to be true that that's happening. It does seem like my guess on the situation is that he'll be back for 2021, and then next year is pretty much up in the air. I think that they'll do part of this agreement from what I've gathered is that they'll let Aaron Rodgers decide to do whatever he wants in 2022. They want him back for 2021, and now they probably feel like they've got 6-7 months to figure it out and get Aaron Rodgers, happy. But if he's not, then I think that they would trade him, or who knows? I think that even a release could be on the table. I think they really will do whatever Aaron Rodgers wants by next March, whether that is stick around, be traded, be cut, whatever it is. They just wanted him for this year, and they got him.
That's going to be a lot of awkward meetings, huh?
Nah,
to say the least.
Yeah, for sure.
Aaron Rodgers is using the Tom Brady playbook right now.
Yes.
It's the same thing's going to happen.
Good point, John. You're playing that card.
Yeah. He's definitely playing that right now.
He's not Tom Brady though. Just
no, come on.
Nah, hell no.
Let's not start this debate.
Yeah.
Right
Let's
now.
not do that. Yeah, right. We already know he ain't no Tom Brady and won't be. So yeah, let's leave it there.
With training camp starting up in 2 days for the Patriots, where the players are coming in. I was looking at the PUP list and physically unable to perform list, and I saw Chase Winovich and Jared Stidham's in there. Should there be some concern about Jared Stidham, because I feel like this happened to him last year where he couldn't perform, and evidently he ended up like not even dressing on a game day until Brian Hoyer did what he did out there. So how are we feeling about that? Is he going to be able to make this team?
Well, with Winovich, I expect him to come off the PUP list pretty soon. But Stidham, I don't really know what the situation is. I don't think anyone really knows what the situation is that landed him on PUP, because from the last that we saw in minicamp, he still looked healthy. And being placed on the PUP list means that that's something that happened on the football field. Otherwise, he would have been placed on non-football injury list. So it's interesting. I don't know if it's going to be a long, lingering thing, but if it is, then there's certainly a possibility that Stidham won't even make the team this year. And that would be unfortunate for him, because I thought he actually looked pretty good during the spring. I think he looked pretty good during OTAs and minicamp. In some of those practices, he looked like the best quarterback on the field, and maybe that's just because he's got more knowledge of the system. But, spring practices aren't always the best for a player like Cam Newton, who does so much with his legs. So that could be a factor as well. But, yeah, I thought that Stidham looked good in the spring, and if he can't start off this summer healthy, that certainly affects his ability to make the roster this season.
Absolutely.
For sure.
One player, that was in the news quite a bit, the last couple of months, and it kind of like died down. And now I'm seeing his name in the news again, and that's Deshaun Watson. And now I'm hearing that the Texans are open to trading him, something like 5 assets and a player or something like that. Do you think somebody would look into him, and what happens to him? Does he actually start this year, or would he have to sit? Because we don't know what's happening with the case.
It's a tough situation. The Texans are willing to trade him. I think that teams will be willing to trade for him, but what a team will be willing to give up right now with so much uncertainty and what the Texans want in a trade might still be a little bit far apart, at least until those teams know what's going to happen with Deshaun Watson, if he is going to get suspended, if the NFL is going to put him on the commissioner's exempt list. There's still a lot of different possibilities in play. My guess is that we'll never see Deshaun Watson in a Texans uniform again. He's reporting. I don't think that means he's going to practice. I don't think that means that he's another one of those guys who I think he's going to hold in rather than hold out so he doesn't get fined $50,000 a day. But I do expect him to get traded at some point. It just depends on when the case is clear, what happens with all of the cases, what happens with the lawsuits, and whether a team decides ultimately, all right, we might not have him for this season, but we've still got him for the length of his contract, so he's still a player that's worth giving up all of those assets and all of those players, which I think eventually a team will decide that. It just might take a little bit of time.
Yeah, I saw that, quarterbacks were reporting for the Texans. Quarterbacks were reporting, and that Deshaun Watson was supposed to be in attendance. I don't know, with everything so in the air, like, is that a good move on the Texans' end?
I mean, I think they kind of have to. They have to let him report at this point, because I think that that's the path at this point to trading him. That's the path to getting themselves out of this situation. I know that for a long time they said that they weren't going to trade him. That's out the window now. I think that after everything that they've done at the quarterback position, they signed Tyrod Taylor, they drafted Davis Mills, they brought in Jeff Driscoll for some guaranteed money. I think that they've basically accepted the fact that this is what they have to do, and now this is the path to actually get it there.
Yeah, no, for sure. Wanted to ask you, Doug, who do you think are the favorites, to win the Super Bowl? What teams do you think would, should definitely be on the, on the top of that list?
I think the Bucs are definitely up there again. I think that, some Patriots fans might not want to hear that, but they might be better this season. I mean, Tom Brady's got a full year in the system. He said after the year that he was having trouble learning the playbook last season. So now the fact that he's got a full year in the system, that helps him quite a bit. He was playing on a torn MCL last season as well. So
which is crazy, right?
Unbelievable. Now, that helps too. They brought back basically their entire team. So you have to look at them, I'd say, as the Super Bowl favorites. Beyond that, the Chiefs are in it again. They really reshaped their offensive line, brought in Joe Thuney. I actually think that the one area of concern for the Chiefs is actually their pass catchers, kind of similar to the Patriots. They've got Tyreek Hill. They've got Travis Kelce. They have almost no one else besides those guys. So we'll see how that
What about D'Amico Harmon? Or
I mean,
Is he?
they've got Mecole Hardman, but he's just never really he hasn't done it yet at this point. So they got him, Byron Pringle, some of the same names they've had before. Buffalo Bills are up there again this season, and then Packers. If they've really got Aaron Rodgers back for another season, which that's what it looks like, then I think that they'll be right back in there again. So who knows? Could be the same conference championship games that we saw last year. Patriots might be in it this season, but those are the four teams I'd really look at once again this season to be competing for a Super Bowl.
Oh, good. That's good. Yeah. No, I definitely would agree with that. Those are definitely teams I'd have on my list, and I think certainly are, the favorites, going into this season. I saw that you had just, become a reporter for the, not Patriots, Pro Football Focus, excuse me. But I wanted to, ask you, I know you with, Winesson for a while as the beat writer, or beat reporter for the Patriots. So, been covering the team for a while. What's your, favorite moment, as a beat writer, covering the team from during your time?
That's a good question. Thanks for asking that.
Yeah, no problem.
Probably, I think it is the Falcons Super Bowl, the Patriots Falcons Super Bowl.
It's a good one. That's a good one, definitely.
Just that whole week in Houston was just a really fun week. It was a fun year in general, just because the Patriots were able to come back after Tom Brady was suspended for the first 4 weeks of the season, and then just the memories of that game, just the Julian Edelman catch is something that's just like burned in my memory. Where when
exactly
when that, I think I was in the auxiliary press box, which is actually like in the stands. It's kind of set off from fans. They kind of barricaded off from fans, but you're actually in the stands. And when he made that catch, I saw live, I was like, I think he caught that ball. And it just seemed so unbelievable at the time, because obviously it was like hovering off the ground, but I'm not sure. I can't remember if I was watching it on binoculars or just in person. I was saying to Zach Cox, who's the other beat reporter for Nesson, or it was my fellow beat reporter for Nesson, I was like, dude, I think he caught that ball. And then, they finally showed it up on the video screen, and the ball really was hovering off the turf, and he caught it, and everything. It was just like so completely unbelievable. That, the entire comeback. I got to cover some really good Super Bowls just as far as Patriots go.
Did you write your story, whatever story you were writing for? Did you write that halfway through and
then deleted it?
That?
I was writing what went wrong for the Patriots, like why they lost, and I was writing it. I usually start writing around the fourth quarter, so I started writing it probably like midway through the third quarter, early in the fourth quarter, something like that. And then at a certain point, I think it was after the Hightower sack, I was like, I think they might win this game. So I did. I had to throw that story out, or just kind of put it aside, start writing a whole new one, had to kind of start scrambling completely. But yeah, I mean, that's what you have to experience as a beat reporter. That's not always the most fun thing, is that you're rewriting stories and having to write thousands of words.
But that's a good one to rewrite, though.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And
I'd gladly rewrite that.
Yeah. I think the story I wrote was, Tom Brady's the greatest quarterback of all time, and anyone who says differently is wrong. It was like at that point, after he came back, there's just no denying.
There's no debate.
Yeah.
Right.
But
I agree. That definitely is the night that he became the GOAT.
Yeah.
For forever, I think, and really cemented himself and put himself over Montana, because I think him and Montana at that point were pretty close and neck and neck, and then once he did that, came back from 28-3 in the Super Bowl, and beat the Falcons and won in overtime 38-28, and had pulled off the unbelievable comeback. That's pretty much was like, whether you love him or hate him, you gotta admit, if you know football and you're a football fan, Tom Brady's the greatest ever to do it. It's simple as that.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think that Patriots fans probably thought it before that win, but just every NFL fan had to accept it at that point. I feel like, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
I saw on Twitter you had tweeted about fans getting vaccinated at the training camps. I believe it was if you get vaccinated at one of the 4 training camps, you'll be able to win some kind of voucher or something like that. Does that go for people that's already vaccinated? Because I feel like that's unfair. You know, if I come and I'm vaccinated and I can't get into this free voucher stuff.
That's true. That is kind of unfair. I don't think it does. I think that, maybe get like a third or fourth dose or something. No, I'm not advising that. But, yeah, no, I think it was like $25 to the concession stand to vaccinate. I guess it's just like to get those stragglers out there who still aren't vaccinated, just to convince them to do it. But no, I'm with you. I mean, yeah, it seems like you should show that vaccination card and still get that $25.
I agree with that.
Absolutely. Doug, I've been reading your stuff for a long time, man. How did you get started at Nesson and getting into the Patriots and stuff like that? Like, what path did you take to get there?
I went to Emerson College and then
down the street.
Yep,
that's right.
Okay. And after college, I was kind of like I was writing for my high school paper. I didn't get a full-time gig out of high school. I actually played in a band for a while, like for a year or two. Went on tour in the band, like wasn't taking life overly serious coming out of college. Then my mom kind of was like, well, you got to get your act together. So I started working a 9-to-5 job, unrelated to journalism or anything like that. But then I started writing for a blog called anypatriotsdraft.com, and that got me really into the draft, got me really into, just covering the Patriots on a day-to-day basis. And then there was an opening at Nesson just to cover their desk shift, which is covering all sports. It was Wednesday through Sunday, 4 p.m. to midnight. Not the most glorious thing, low pay, all that stuff. But at least got my foot in the door. And then about a year later, I got added to the Patriots beat. Actually, about 6 months later, I covered the 2 Patriots playoff games in 2012 against the Texans and the Ravens. And then after that, I was on the Patriots beat full time. So yeah, that allowed me to kind of get my foot in the door. And then once I got my foot in the door, started covering the Patriots and just kind of built it up from there. So that was the job I really wanted once I started getting serious about journalism. So it was really cool to do it for as many years that I did. Obviously, like you guys said, now I'm at PFF. I'm covering the whole NFL, which was the next step that I wanted to take. But I wouldn't give back those years covering the Patriots for anything. It was definitely awesome.
I bet.
Absolutely.
What do you think is the most important thing that up and coming writers and podcasters need to know about trying to make their way into the industry?
I think just to get as many reps as possible, whether that is, writing or podcasting or just being on air, being used to talking, being used to writing, all that stuff. And then I think what worked out for me was having an expertise. Just having an expertise on the Patriots really was pretty helpful for me. I think when I got hired by Nesson, they were also hiring a Patriots beat reporter, but they wanted to promote that position from within. But I think that they did have their eye on someone later who might be able to fill that job, as well or better or whatever it was. So I think that helped me at the time, is just having that expertise, covering the NFL, knowing a lot about the Patriots. But then also, like I said, covering high schools, got a lot of reps doing that. Writing for anypatriotsdraft.com, got a lot of reps doing that. I wouldn't have been nearly as good of a writer if I hadn't done that before I actually started the full-time job.
That's really good. Thanks for the advice.
Sure.
I think, we want to get into some fun stuff here. Do you have a top 5 Patriots of all time on your list?
That's tough. I don't know if I can do that off the top of my head. I mean, obviously Brady would be number 1.
Yeah.
Richard Seymour, I think, is one of the more underrated Patriots players of all time.
Going to Hall of Fame.
Yep. I think that,
yep, that's right.
Yeah, finally going to the Patriots Hall of Fame. Hopefully the Pro Football Hall of Fame is next. But in those early dynasty teams, he was the best player on probably the 2001, maybe even 2003 team until Tom Brady really stepped up. So he'd certainly be in there. If you go way back, John Hanna, I think, would have to make the top 5 list just because he's one of the best guards.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Another legend, yeah.
Yep, for sure. And then, you got to have a guy from this era. So Gronk, I think, would also be in there. He'd probably be 4th. Maybe Andre Tippett's 5th. just because he's also in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. But, I mean, I think that Devin McCourty, Dante Hightower, Julian Edelman, those guys are among the most underrated players in NFL history just because, there was the whole debate after Julian Edelman retired, should he be in the Hall of Fame? I don't really care all about that. But if you're the best player, like Devin McCourty, Dante Hightower, and Julian Edelman were, three of the best players on teams that won 3 Super Bowls, you've got to be one of the best players in the history of the NFL, And that's not to say that they deserve to be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but I just think that they deserve more credit. Patrick Chung's right in there too. He was one of the best players on 3 Super Bowl teams, and that's not saying nothing about a player. That's some serious stuff. That you've got to be pretty good to be that good on a winning team like he was.
For sure. Would you put like guys like Ty Law in that conversation, who just recently got in the Hall of Fame? I
didn't think about Ty Law. He would certainly be in there as well. Maybe over Andre Tippett, maybe right on there with Andre Tippett. Yeah, I mean, I was a big fan of Ty Law growing up, even before I actually moved to the area. I was a big fan of Lawyer Malloy as well, Teddy Bruce.
Oh yeah.
So I think that Mike Vrabel goes in there as well. It's so tough to make a definitive top 5 for the Patriots. It's almost easier to do like a Mount Rushmore for the Patriots, because then you put Bill Belichick, Robert Kraft, Tom Brady, and then someone else. And the someone else is kind of tough to find out who that 4th guy would be or figure out who that 4th guy would be. But they've just had so many, great players over the years that it is tough to whittle it down to 4 or 5 guys.
For sure. It is a tough list without a question. Also wanted to ask you another fun question. Who's like your favorite players that you actually got to cover? I'd probably see who's your top 3 players on the Patriots that you covered.
Just as far as like top guys to talk to, the first 2 are easy to say. Duron Harmon was an awesome guy, always fun to talk to. Really clutch player, obviously, with the Patriots as well, but just a great guy in the locker room. Ted Karras is up there with him. Ted Karras was always an awesome guy to talk to in the locker room. Just guys who are normal guys, willing to chop it up with people in the locker room and just be normal people. Third guy, I might go with Devin McCourty, just because he was always really great to us. As media, just a normal guy, super funny. I think that Devin McCourty's sense of humor is a little bit underrated. He's always got, some sort of barb that he's throwing at a teammate or kind of, busting their balls or anything like that. So I think he'd be in there as well. But I always liked covering Julian Edelman as well. He was just a guy that, reminded me of dudes that I grew up with, dudes that I played in bands with, dudes that I was like, he just had this demeanor about him that was like, this gruff outside demeanor, but if you got to know him, he'd be a funny guy. And, I think that he carried the team a lot just as far as personality goes, where he was no nonsense. When he was on the field, he didn't want to think about anything other than football. He didn't want to talk about anything other than football. And he kind of brought that with him to the locker room, but he was a nice, funny guy as well.
Absolutely. Well,
Doug, for sure. Those are all good guys.
Right.
Definitely good personalities.
For sure.
Well, Doug, we really appreciate you coming on to Pro Fan Sports Podcast and answering our questions. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. And again, if you're watching, subscribe to the channel and follow Doug at DougKyed on Twitter to keep up with, Patriots content as well as, everything around the league now, because it's at Profootballfocus. So, again, thank you so much for coming on and giving us your time.
For sure. Thanks a lot for having me. This was fun, guys.
This was awesome. Thanks again for coming on. We really appreciate it. Now I'm glad that you're able to come on and have some fun and talk some football with us. So
I think we're planning on going to one of these training camps. So
we are actually, yes.
Nice.
We run into you over there somehow.
Yeah,
that would be great.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it would be nice to see you over there. I'll probably even go to a couple, since
nice.
I go to one every year. But since we didn't have one last year, to make up for that, I'll probably go to
right.
So I'll be over there. I'll be around. I'm looking forward to getting back over there and catching some training camp practices in person. It'll be nice to be over there since we haven't been over there in a couple years.
Definitely, yeah. Shoot me a DM and we'll I'll come and say hi if I'm also there. That'd be awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah, definitely. We'll do. For
For
sure.
All right, guys. Thanks
All
a
right.
lot for having
See
me.
you
Yeah,
later.
thanks, Doug.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You have a good night. Take care.
You too.
All right, thank you.
Hey,
Awesome,
man.
guys.
There y'all have it, man. That was DougKyed from Pro Football Focus and formerly of Nesson. You know, like I was saying, if you're a Patriots fan and you don't know who DougKyed is, you might need to give us your card back because this
Yeah,
guy,
seriously.
you know,
For real.
give us your
Facts.
Patriots fan card back because
Yes,
he's
definitely.
legit, man. And
Right,
make sure you're
right.
subscribing, commenting on the video. You know, send us some questions too. If you got questions, comment them on the video, and we'll make sure we answer questions in our next videos. All right. Until episode 72, this was 71. We'll catch y'all later.
Peace. Have a good week, everyone. See y'all next week.